I had selective mutism, which meant in certain situations I didn't speak.
Mhm.
When I was outside of the home, I didn't speak. Around new people, I wouldn't speak. It's like someone pressed a mute button on me. And that later developed into social anxiety. And then that sort of led to depression. And it was a long time before I was able to get some good support and good help for this.
We have a very, very exciting guest speaker today. We have Dr. Ali Matu from the YouTube channel, Dr. Ali Matu. Some of you might have seen him on our channel recently where we dissected one of, I don't know, would you call it a session, a meeting, a
A,
conversation?
what did I call I think I call those things office hours.
Office
Just
hours
yeah.
conversation that he had with a viewer about social anxiety. And you just did such a great job with that young man, talking him through social anxiety. I was super excited when you agreed to come talk to us about it because social
Well,
anxiety is a big struggle for a lot of um, people that I see that have trouble with alcohol.
I was first off, Amber, I gotta say thank you for doing that, for dissecting my video, for diving. Dissecting sounds so
Yeah.
scary, but what I think you did when you reached out and you said, "Hey, is this okay? Can I do this?" First off, I was just really honored that you would think something I did is worth like further
It
investigation.
definitely was. Yeah.
I mean, that's like from colleague to colleague. What a great compliment that is. So thank you for that. I just thought that was so cool. So then when you said, "Hey, you want to talk more about this stuff?" I was like, "Yes," because I love collaborating with people who want to collaborate and help. So thanks for having me.
For our listeners, just give us a general idea about what social anxiety might look like or feel like, or how
Yeah.
would you know if you had it, or how would you know if your loved one had it?
Yeah, so self-disclosure, I am very passionate about this subject because this is what I had or have
Mhm.
and didn't realize it. When I was a kid in kindergarten. Kindergarten was like the first time I was really doing stuff outside of my home. I had selective mutism, which meant in certain situations I didn't speak.
Mhm.
When I was outside of the home, I didn't speak. Around new people, I wouldn't speak. It's like someone pressed a mute button on me. And that later developed into social anxiety. And then that sort of led to depression. And it was a long time before I was able to get some good support and good help for this. So this is something that's very personal to me. When I was a full-time practicing clinician, this is something that I spent a lot of time treating in individual and group therapy. So I'm so excited to talk about this. But your question is such a difficult one because no two people with social anxiety look quite the same.
Mhm.
Amber, I think there's a stereotype about what social anxiety looks like.
Mhm.
And if you do a Google image search, you'll find like people with their hoodies on, like no, or there's have you ever seen this one, Amber?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like all these Google images like that, and I've never seen
You've never had a
anybody.
client in your office doing that?
Yeah, or like in the corner, like yeah.
Mhm.
No, I've never seen that. Social anxiety, like diagnostically, what it's about a fear of evaluation,
Mhm.
a fear of being judged,
Mhm.
a fear of doing something embarrassing and people might laugh at you. You might be ridiculed. You might be judged for something you do or something you believe or something about your appearance. And uh, if you start working with people, you might dig down further and you find people are really worried about being stupid, dumb, strange, unlovable, ugly, all of these things that are socially undesirable traits.
Mhm.
And what happens to people who have social anxiety is they either avoid certain social situations or they're able to go through them and it's quite difficult for them, quite distressing, or they are able to go through them, but their performance is really just plummets. And this could be about going to parties. and socializing and making friends, but it can also be about presenting at work. It could be about networking. It can also be about being an athlete and performing and
Mhm.
the fear of evaluation from other people and of professional judges. How are you going to be seen? It could be a musician who has to perform. If you think about it, all the times in the day that we have to interact with other people, from answering a phone call, to opening the front door, to going to a store, to talking to a teacher, talking to a boss, a coworker, we're always having to interact with other people, even like typing online.
Mhm.
There's so many ways in which every day we're interacting with people, and people who have social anxiety very much struggle with those interactions. They might avoid those interactions, or they might not do well in those interactions.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard because they can have that, like you said, avoidance reaction or a freeze reaction.
Yep.
Or like, I also like that you said, it might even be that the person can be in social situations, they do it, but they're extremely uncomfortable. So some people
Yes.
may have social anxiety, you might never know, like a YouTuber, that's
Yes.
on, and they could have social anxiety, but you don't even know it because you think, how could they possibly have it? Like they're talking to a
Oh
million
yeah.
people right now or something.
Well, what you don't see is what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
My heart, like,
Mm-hmm.
racing. Like, you are one of the most comfortable people for me to talk to. I'm not that socially anxious here.
Yeah.
Um, but I always feel better around other mental health folks. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, because I feel like you got me, you know me, we're good. Um, but when I'm doing this kind of stuff with someone who my brain says, "Oh no, they think you're not good,"
Mm-hmm.
then my heart starts to race. I sweat. My pits are just like
Get the pit
wet as the
stains.
ocean. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then you know what happens in my head, Amber?
What?
Then I'm like, "Oh no, they see I'm sweating,"
Uh-huh.
which makes me sweat even worse, which I hate. Oh my gosh. And then it's like that cycle of judgment. But in my work, I have met people who, don't have a lot of friends, are quite lonely. They have a hard time meeting new people, and they kind of fit that example of social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But then I've also worked with people who it's all professional.
Mm-hmm.
They have a hard time advocating for themselves. They have a hard time saying no, of
Mm-hmm.
being assertive. They feel like they're often taken advantage of. Um, and it's that kind of social anxiety. And then I've worked with people who they do incredibly well at work. They have a great career. Um, but there's one or two small areas, whether it's about communicating their wants and needs with their partners, and they're just not able to do that because of their social anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
or something else where you would never guess that this person struggles in this way. No two people with social anxiety look alike.
Mm-hmm.
It can be so different person to person.
Because it's about your own inner experience, and you're the only
Yes.
one that knows about your own inner experience.
And that's the world of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the challenge of anxiety. That's why I think a lot of people who might have anxiety disorders don't realize they have anxiety disorders,
Mm-hmm.
because it can feel so invisible. And yeah, you can navigate the world, you can avoid things, you can do things badly, you can struggle with them, and other people are not going to know.
I like how you're giving the different examples of how it shows up in different people. Because as you're saying that, I'm even just remembering back different clients I've had, and
Mm,
some that it looked like I'm just going to avoid going. Others that looked like super put together, and then they're telling me these
yeah,
thoughts they have in their head, and I'm like, really, like, and I'm
right.
even surprised because it really is quite different, which is kind of similar to the things that I treat. Like alcoholism looks very different in different people. And that stereotype, a lot of times, gets in the way of people getting help or getting better because they may think they don't even have it because they're thinking of it, it looks a certain way.
There was a moment in my life as a therapist, where I said to myself, you know what, you you keep trying to like read these like phone screens, or the initial contact you get
Mm-hmm.
from new patients.
Yep.
You read the description, right, and then
Mm-hmm.
your head is trying to like already create the story of who this person is.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this moment where I was like, Ali, stop, because you're always wrong.
I know.
Your first impression, your second, third, fourth, fifth
Mm-hmm.
impression is always wrong. I feel like it's not until a few weeks in that you might be beginning
Mm-hmm.
to get
Mm-hmm.
where this person is coming from and what their life is like.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've had that experience a million times, and then I've also had it when my client was telling me about someone in their life, and I had like this picture in my head of who they were, like they're like a character in their show, and then I meet them like, you're nothing like I thought you were.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And you
yeah,
think
yeah.
you know everything about them, but you don't. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Humans have a way of constantly surprising you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the challenges of being a therapist is being like totally open to that.
Mm-hmm.
That like you don't know what's going to happen week to week. You never know the story of someone's life. And um, I think the coolest thing about people in mental health is they are so open, and we work so hard to be compassionate and not judging.
Mm-hmm. So I've had several clients who I feel like that the social anxiety was at the core. When it comes to like drugs and alcohol, people always say, well, what's the core issue? What's really going
Yeah, yeah,
on?
yeah, yeah,
That's sort
yeah.
of the lingo. And I don't always buy into that, but a lot of times there is an underlying thing that is triggering, or maybe even cause the problem to start to develop in the beginning. And
Yeah.
social anxiety is a big one for a lot of people. And not only is it a core underlying issue, but it also keeps them stuck in it because they're very scared they won't be able to function without it. They won't be able to go to work. They won't be able to interact.
Yeah, it can also keep people from getting help too.
Mm-hmm.
On one of my social anxiety videos, there was a comment where someone said, um, "Hey, Dr. Ali, I wish you also mentioned that social anxiety can make it hard to talk to a therapist,"
Yeah, that's a
which
really good point.
is a really good point. I should
Mm-hmm.
have mentioned that in my
I'm
video,
glad. Yeah.
because the courage it takes to pick up the phone, to write an email. Amber, it's so hard. It's so hard to find a therapist. It's so hard to overcome all that stuff that says, no, you got it. Don't reach out. You're fine. You're fine. You can handle this yourself. Or to like navigate all the billing issues, the paying issues, insurance issues,
Mm-hmm.
blah, 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 blah. I hate all that.
When you have social anxiety, you're already worried what people are thinking about you, and then you put yourself in a room to sit on the couch where someone's full 100, like on the spotlight, being spotlight, and you
Yeah.
know that they're like totally analyzing you.
They're writing all this stuff down that you're saying.
It's
What
almost
are they
like
writing? What are they
therapy is
thinking?
behavioral desensitization in and of itself, just the act of going.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's hard. I have um I when I was practicing full time, I never said this, though maybe I should have said this. When someone comes in my office, I kind of want to say like, "I'm so happy you're here. You you made it to this point.
Mhm.
Like this takes such courage
Mhm.
to make it this far. I'm so proud of you." But like that's like before you even met the person,
Mhm.
But I want to like I want to just like give them a hug and say, I am so proud of you for making it to this point,
Mhm.
because I really feel that way. Obviously, I don't. And then we talk about informed consent and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to do that. That's where my head goes.
I'm thinking of a client that I had forever who's a very smart guy, very professional guy, and he struggled with social anxiety, and you could tell it in the office. And I worked with him for literally on and off for years,
Mhm.
and I thought the world of him. And I know he he trusted me. But every time he come to my office, he looked like he was going to puke for the first 10 minutes. Like he had that like white ghosted like,
Yeah.
and then, sometimes I'd even say, "You got that look, dude. Like, how long we got to do this?" And then we would laugh or whatever. He's like, "I know." And it just, even though we had talked so many times for so long, you could see it on him.
When social anxiety is a big part of the picture, uh, it's all those little daily social interactions, and
Hmm.
this is where I would always talk about everyday bravery. I'm not talking about superhero bravery. I'm not talking about like what you see in the movies. Again, like I'm gonna pick on Hollywood here. Um, like when you see bravery in the movies, it's this big, strong, heroic person who looks fearless.
Hmm.
But that's if you look up the definition of courage, it's not being fearless.
Right.
It's being afraid and facing the thing that scares you.
Right.
You cannot be courageous without being scared. So your client who looked like they were gonna puke, I think is one of the highest examples of courage
Hmm.
because 'cause they're literally facing their fear in that moment.
Hmm.
I think that is just, like, the most heroic thing, and everyday courage, everyday bravery for me is about all those small moments in the day that are difficult,
Hmm.
and you choose to face them because it's the life you wanna live.
Hmm. Especially when it comes to like addiction recovery kind of stuff, it's almost all done in groups.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
at times when I've had clients who were struggling and maybe they were seeing me individually, but I wanted them to be in an IOP or something like that. Man, that is a hurdle. I mean, it's always a hurdle to get people to go to like group therapy or even AA or whatever, but like now you're looking at, they're looking at you like, are you kidding me?
yeah,
But
yeah.
something interesting I found in the event that I can get them to go, a lot of times they function better in the group than they do individually. And I think I
Yeah.
know why, but I'm not sure. I'm just guessing. I'm just like have a theory on it, but I don't know.
What's your theory? What's your
Well, my
theory?
theory is, and I try to tell them this too. I'm like, look, you can sit in the back. You don't have to say nothing if you don't want to. I'm not going to like
Yeah.
embarrass you. So
Yeah, yeah.
because you can just sit in the back and watch and not say anything if you want to. And when you're in an individual session, the spotlight is on you like
Yeah.
100%, and there's no like evading or taking a break or having your own thoughts, like somebody's watching you. So that's my theory on it. It's really hard to
Yeah.
convince people to
Oh,
go.
it's so hard. It's so hard. I'm a big believer in the 1-2 combo of group and individual.
Hmm.
To work on social anxiety, you kinda need to be in social situations,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Like,
Yes.
I would often tell my patients, like, "Look, I love working with you, but this
Right.
is not a social situation."
Right.
Like, it's one-on-one, and my job is purely to help you.
Hmm.
Like, you need to be with a few other people, like, one person who's distracted, one person who's rambling, one
Hmm.
person who, like, wants to talk to you, one person who you're not sure, and
Hmm.
is, like, they're kinda looking at you, like, all that social stuff
Hmm.
has to get activated, and then when you're in a living, breathing social situation, you can start practicing all the things we're learning. Um, I had a client that I worked with who was like that, who would be so much more calm in a social situation, unless I called on them,
Hmm.
because that person would never raise their hand, they would
Hmm.
never volunteer, they
Hmm.
would never, and so we talked about it, and I said, "Hey, John Doe, your goal is to volunteer more, and if you don't in the first half of group, I'm gonna call on you.
Hmm.
So this is what you're working on," you know? And then the other thing, Amber, I had, another person who I was working with who, for her, she would get so overwhelmed in a social group situation
Hmm.
that she would that feel that need to flee,
Hmm.
like, immediately, and in fact, she did that in the first group that we were in. She
Hmm.
just ran out and then was crying, and I said, "Okay, Jane Doe, we're gonna build up your ability just to be there,
Mhm.
just to sit. You don't have to say anything.
Mhm.
Your goal is just to sit and get through, and I want you to practice ABC skill
Mhm.
when you're in there and just sit.
Mhm.
And she went through like one round of my group just learning how to be in there and not be overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And then she did another group, and then she did another group, and by that 3rd group, you were like, "Who is this person?
Yeah.
Who is this social butterfly?"
I think it's hard to convince people of it, even people that don't have social anxiety.
Yes.
It's really hard to convince people of it. Once they do it, they like love it. And I try to tell them,
Mhm.
like, listen, once you get in there, you're gonna want to go because you're like listening to people's lives. It's like your show, and you got to watch the next episode. I'm like, that's how I feel. I got to show up, see if so and so's wife kicked them out, or like whatever happens. And you do get very connected, and that's the
Yeah.
key is for a lot of people that we see with addictions, in our world, and this is my belief, connection is the cure for addiction. And so not
Yeah.
only it's not just that you need to go into that group to hear about addiction. You can watch my YouTube videos and do that. That's not what it
Yeah.
is. It's about the interaction piece that's happening. And so when you're dealing
Yeah.
with somebody that has social anxiety, particularly, they're literally like sometimes like dying of loneliness by the time they get
Yes.
into my office. And I'm
Yes.
like, if you don't connect, you're just sicker and sicker and sicker, and the drinking or whatever it is just this other byproduct of the whole thing.
Oh, if I could give you more thumbs up for that comment, I'll give you all the thumbs up in the world. I think you just hit the nail on the head about the connection too between social anxiety and also substance use
Mhm.
and substance use problems. It's about connection.
Mhm.
Like people with social anxiety struggle because they don't have that connect. The anxiety gets in the way of connecting with other people,
Mhm.
and a lot of times people use substances because we're wired for connection. And if you don't have enough of that in the world, you're gonna get it with other things. You're gonna
Mhm.
get it with alcohol. You're gonna get it with shopping. You're gonna
Mhm.
get it with porn. You're gonna get it somewhere, right? The best things in my groups was when I had someone who had done a few rounds of it,
Mhm.
and they were there that first day someone else was trying.
Mhm.
Because Amber, I can say whatever I want, but at the end of the day, people are like, well, he's a therapist. He has to say that.
Right.
But if there's someone who said, hey, look, I've been doing this like 8 weeks, like you, I thought this was total BS. But I'm here to tell you, like, I am so happy I've done this.
Mhm.
So like stick with it. Like when someone would say that, I'd be like, yes, thank
Mhm.
you. You're making my job so much easier. But when group is working well, I think it's the best thing in mental health.
I'm thinking of a couple of just past scenarios I've run into. Like, I saw this young guy. This was several years back, but he was a college student, and he first started seeing me because he was like smoking too much weed, way too much weed. And once I got in there, it was pretty obvious with him that the thing that was going on was pretty severe social anxiety. And
Mhm.
then that
Oh, yeah.
weed addiction turned into alcohol and turned into something else. But
Yeah.
when I would hear this young man talking, he was in a fraternity and he really wanted to be in the fraternity. But in order to even go to any fraternity event, he had to get so messed up. And I
Yes.
remember him telling me one of the things a fraternity did, which I thought was a good thing to do, is one of the members or two of the members, anytime they had like a party or an event, had to stay sober. They were like the sober lookouts, watching
Yep.
after everybody, which I thought was a good idea. Well, it was
Yep.
his turn to be the sober lookout, and he was
Oh,
freaked out. I mean, he was like, I can't do it. I cannot. I don't know what I'm
yeah.
going to do. And he was just in a sheer panic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I feel like I've worked with this person.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and I think this is like if you and I were in the same clinic, these are probably the kind of cases we'd
Mhm.
be we'd be sharing a lot. Yeah. Um, you know, this is where these two things interact as well is I when I got started as a psychologist, I really wanted to focus on anxiety because research is me search.
Mhm.
That was my
Mhm.
thing. I wanted to help out people who had gone through the stuff that I'm going through or I had gone through. And I my first job was at a place called the um, Clinic for Anxiety and Related Disorders.
Okay.
And so I was like, all right, what are these related disorders? Like what?
Everything else. I
What
was say what's
does
not. I was thinking what doesn't go in that category. Yeah.
right? I had no idea that I was signing up to learn about also substance use, addiction, cannabis,
Depression,
depression,
trauma,
alcohol, like
ADD.
ticks,
I'm
all
trying to think of what wouldn't
yes,
go along with it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, 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 the
Mhm.
list goes on, right?
Mhm.
Anxiety is the most common, mental health problem for adults, and yeah, it relates to a lot of other things. So, weed is a good example where weed can so quickly bring down your anxiety. Same thing with alcohol, and sometimes, weed can also bring up anxiety, and, like, in short amounts,
Mhm.
alcohol might activate you, but in bigger amounts, it like depresses you. Like,
Mhm.
all these substances do these weird things.
Mhm.
But a lot of times, people start using them as a way of managing their anxiety.
Mhm.
Kind of like how you would by taking something like a Klonopin,
Mhm.
that it's a pill that very quickly brings
Mhm.
down your anxiety. Well, people might start using alcohol or cannabis as ways of managing it. And then, like, it mixes with social situations. So if you have social anxiety about meeting new people, but you're going to an event where they serve alcohol, well, problem solved. I
Mhm.
can just have a drink or two, loosen up, liquid courage,
Mhm.
as they used to call it or still sometimes call it. And nowadays, Amber, if you have a vape pen, you
Mhm.
can, without anyone even knowing, indoors, as
I know.
one of my patients took me a long time to figure out, but he was getting high in our waiting room
Yeah. Yeah.
right before coming to see me. Took me a while to figure that one out. I felt like such an old fart. Oh,
I
it's
know.
like,
I know.
um, so that is a part of social anxiety, and that might also be a part of a substance use problem,
Mhm.
and that it might be hard to like figure out. All right, what came first? What's influencing each other? The reality is they both are kind of influencing
Mhm.
each other.
Mhm.
I think what a big criticism I have of like the way most mental health works in America. First off, most mental health just doesn't work in America. Our healthcare system is like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's much better in most parts of the world, but yeah, it's bad here. Um, but we can so easily get focus on the individual. I think anxiety therapists do this more than addiction people. I think addiction people think much more in terms of family, just naturally. That's like the culture over there. But I got trained as working as a kid person,
Mhm.
and then when I was practicing, I was working mostly with teenagers and adults and young adults. But I was trained as a kid person, and when you do work with kids, it's really doing work as a family.
Oh, yeah.
Like like I can do whatever I want with the kid, but if the parent is maintaining the anxiety,
Mhm.
what am I doing? Like I'm
Right.
wasting my time.
Mhm.
And mental health problems are family problems. Mental health problems are relationship problems. Mental health problems are friendship problems.
Mhm.
It's like what you said earlier about connection, Amber.
Mhm.
Like if we don't weave in all these other pieces, of like how like well what if my wife is making all the difficult calls for me so I don't have to deal with that social anxiety,
Mhm.
or what if my friends might be like my relationship with my friends is purely dependent on me going out for drinks with them,
Mhm.
like these kind of things, they tug and pull and push
Mhm.
these different problems, and we got to weave this stuff in because we're not individuals, we're all parts of communities and families and friendships and all that stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And so, when you can look at the big picture, and the bigger picture the better. In our
Mhm.
office I like to say, I'm gonna want to see your grandmama and your dog and your neighbor, probably. Like we don't want to see, and obviously not all that, but we do like to have the big picture, because when you can get the system working right, everything moves smoother. But it is a lot of
Totally.
work, and I do feel for people when we say that, because I feel like, oh, I'm like the mechanic. that came in and said, "No, you're gonna have to do all this and this and this." And you're just like, well, "I just
You
want
know,
breaks or whatever," you know?
I've always pushed back against comparisons to mechanics
Okay.
because I think like yeah in child therapy, folks. Have you ever heard of like the Jiffy Lube parent? Have you ever heard this like saying?
No. So I
So,
know what a
so
helicopter parent is.
right, right. We got
Okay.
helicopter. So Jiffy Lubes, maybe it's like a West Coast thing. I'm here in California, but we have these like oil change
Yeah,
places
we have
called Jiffy
those.
Lube. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So you drop off your car, 30 minutes later, you pick it up, it's all fixed, right?
Yeah.
It's that idea
Oh,
that
yeah.
there are a lot of parents in child therapy that drop off their kid and they want the kid fixed and they pick them up, an hour later and they want the problem solved.
Mhm.
And it's like that's not how it works because like you got to be involved, right?
Mhm.
I can't just fix your car.
That's
So like
right. That's right.
I've always like anytime someone like compares a therapist to a mechanic, I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
it's not like that. But
Yeah.
in this way, I think you're totally right that a lot of times we think it's a simple problem and all these like in a car, like all these things are connected.
Mhm.
Cars are and they're way more complex now.
Mhm.
Um and people are like that too where you can't just fix one small thing. It's not like changing like one little light bulb.
Right.
If it was, you'd be able to do that yourself and a lot of people are able to fix their own little problems by themselves, but if they're seeing us, it might be a bigger problem and
Okay.
it you gotta get everything
Well,
involved.
by the time it gets to us, it's become that way. And I try to tell families that it's not like I'm saying the family created the problem, but
Yeah.
the problem itself will change the family system. That's just,
Yes.
if your right knee gets hurt, you start leaning on your left knee too much, and then your left knee has a problem. So it's,
Yes.
it's not a blame thing. It's not even saying, something wrong with your family. It's just saying, like, we need to like the teeth, we just need to move everything a little bit so it fits back
Yeah,
right.
about 15 years ago, Amber, I broke I broke my leg, I dislocated it, I tore a ligament, I needed surgery to fix it. Doing something very stupid. I was just on the beach. My friend's nephew was skimboarding. Is
Yeah, I've
this
seen
like
those. Uh-huh.
yeah. And I fell down the wrong way. My leg went one way, I went another way,
Ooh.
broke it, needed to get it fixed, right? And then I was on crutches after
Mhm.
that. Like my leg was healing fine, surgery went fine. But as I was on crutches, then I developed trigger finger, which I don't know if you know what trigger finger is,
Yeah, I've heard of
but
that. Uh-huh.
yeah, it's when this figure is like you're pulling you got your hand in
Mhm.
a gun and like it's pulling the trigger. So my finger would get stuck on this. And so then I had to go to a doctor for this. So I went to a different doctor, an orthopedic doctor for
Mhm.
my trigger finger. And I walked in and they're like, so what's wrong with your leg? He saw the cast on my leg and then he thought I was in for help with the leg, and I'm like, "Don't worry about the leg. I got to talk about the hand."
Yeah.
And then we just had this like funny moment where
Mhm.
he was like, "Oh, I'm an orthopedic guy. I saw the cast. I
Mhm.
thought this." But like that's how our you're so right. Like that's how our body works. It tries to compensate in different ways. And my hands were taking up too much of the work now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so they were overstressed and this other problem developed.
Mhm.
And and then I found out that it's apparently Ali's physical therapy hour here, but uh, and then I found out that I have this like genetically I have like worse arthritis than most people my
Okay.
age. And so that's what made me vulnerable for this.
Mhm.
And so, we start talking about families, and it's like, yeah, if there's one problem, the family's trying to compensate, and maybe there's genetically stuff
Mhm.
floating in families
Mhm.
that's more common, like
Mhm.
my arthritis is. Maybe it was anxiety, maybe it's depression, maybe it's this other stuff. And we all got our stuff, and
Mhm.
we're all trying to help each other. So let's figure out what's going on in the body. Let's figure out how to help each other, and let's figure out how to move forward.
Yeah. So one of the ways, obviously, that people with social anxiety tend to compensate, at least in my world, I'm sure there are other things they do, but is substances,
Yeah.
particularly alcohol and marijuana. Those are the two biggies that I see. Uh, Adults, alcohol; younger people, marijuana.
Exact same
There's a little on
experience
both
on my
sides
end.
there, but
Yep.
as a rule of thumb, these days, that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yep.
especially the young people I see smoking weed, they're the most depressed, anxious of all the patients I see. I'm like, they are
Yeah.
the worst. They're just so miserable. They're so unhappy. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, the data backs it up. Like, anxiety and depression, loneliness,
Mhm.
is really high among Gen Z.
Mhm.
We also know that like young girls are particularly struggling
Mhm.
with depression. So it's a really tough time out there, and I think a lot of it has to do with how hard it is for young people to be able to like do things together now outside of school and
Mhm.
home and all that sort of stuff. I think we got a big loneliness problem, and that loneliness has been the loneliness epidemic has been going on since decades. You
Mhm.
know, I think it's only gotten worse. So the I'm glad you mentioned the word coping
Mhm.
because I got a colleague of mine. Um, we would spend a lot of time talking about this, and we'd have some of those like those great like debate slash fights that you
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
with colleagues where you're like really like try to figure this stuff out. I would have this with her about coping skills, and we got to a good place of figuring this out. And what we agreed to is a coping skill is something that helps you to be flexible,
Okay.
and it helps you to face difficult things in a flexible way.
Mhm. Okay.
And that means you're not completely dependent upon it. That means it doesn't limit your options, it
Mhm.
expands your options.
Mhm.
So if you think about substances, I had this one patient who I treated. She had panic disorder,
Mhm.
and she had a panic disorder and agoraphobia, and she had to get on a really long flight. First time in her life, she had to get on a flight that's more than an hour long.
Mhm.
She had to do this for work, and she didn't want to tell her job, "I'm like too anxious. I can't do this." Right.
Right.
So I actually encourage, and she came to me with like 2 weeks until the flight.
Mhm.
So I was like, we don't have a lot of time
Yeah.
here. Maybe go talk to my friend, the psychiatrist. Maybe she can prescribe you some Klonopin and take that, and maybe that'll help you with this flight,
Yeah,
and you'll be able
sure.
to get over it.
Mhm.
Um, for whatever reason, she decided, you know what, I'm gonna try to just like have a shot at the airport, and maybe that'll be enough. And if I need another drink, I'll have another drink, and I can do that, and I'll get over the flight. And I
Mhm.
said, you know, you could try. Like
Okay.
I whatever you want to try, like it's go for it.
Yeah.
She did that and she was fine.
Mhm.
She never really otherwise drinks. She doesn't really have to go on these flights a lot time. And so in that situation, did it help her to be flexible and face her goals?
Yeah.
Like maybe.
Yeah.
Um, but this is very different than someone who like the client you were describing, where if they didn't have enough weed or enough alcohol, they couldn't go to those fraternity
Mhm.
events, or their anxiety would go so high. For them, it sounds like substances limited
Mhm.
their choices,
Mhm.
because without the substance, they can't do
Mhm.
this stuff. So I think it's very complicated. Like what expands your options
Mhm.
and helps you to be flexible and you're not stuck with those
Mhm.
choices, versus what limits and what makes you more inflexible.
Mhm. And there's certain circumstances that can be helpful, but then it crosses the line. And if you use a substance over and over and over as a self medicating thing, then it, even just on a neurochemical level, begins to make the anxiety worse and worse and worse. And now, whatever, usually anything that's addictive, whatever you started taking it for, whatever the thing does for you initially, it makes 10 times worse in the
Mm,
back end. So, like if you take
mm.
stimulants because you want more energy and motivation, well, the rebound of that is depression, no energy. You know, if you drink to feel less anxious, the rebound of alcohol is crazy anxiety. So it's like whatever it's solving up front, it makes worse. So when you start doing that
That's
over and over and over, then you get trapped.
that is so fascinating. That is so I feel like we could talk about what you just said for like
Yeah.
hours. I've never really thought about it like that. I think you're so right. It immediately made me think of, like, a few people I worked with, who struggled with smoking.
Mm-hmm. And that's
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest obstacles for people with substance use problems because they remember when it was helpful and they desperately want, they usually want to cut it back. They don't want to do whatever they're doing to the extent they are right now. They want to cut it back, but they lose that capacity in there somewhere. And that's,
I'm a big, Star Trek fan,
yeah.
Amber,
Mm-hmm.
and, you got this guy, Jean-Luc Picard.
Mm-hmm.
He's, like, this big hero, right? So, what he was known for in, Star Trek: The Next Generation is drinking Earl Grey tea,
Mm-hmm.
and they just brought back the character in this new series,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's drinking decaf because he's like, "My body just can't handle it anymore." You know,
Like
like,
in the show, he's drinking decaf. Okay.
the show, they made a point. There's,
Okay.
like, he's a lot older now. Now he's on decaf because he can't handle the caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
Our relationship to substances changes over the course of our life and over the course of, like, our the experience in the
Mm-hmm.
moment we might be in right now.
Mm-hmm. I can't even remember what book this was in. I was reading it. I think it was like one of Dr. Daniel Stiegel books or something, but it was talking
Mm,
about that there's this like physical part of the brain that
mhm,
is responsible for self-awareness. And
mm,
we all think like, oh, it would be good to be self-aware, but there is such a thing as too self-aware, you know. And
yes.
so he's like, it's like when you're like aware of where your hands are when you're having a conversation with someone.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
if you're aware of too much at once, then it creates this just real uncomfortableness inside. And I thought, oh, okay, there's like a part of the brain that maybe the volume is turned up too high on. And that can
yes.
create this over consciousness almost.
Yeah, I think a big part of social anxiety is, you are too internally focused.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's like your frontal cortex is thinking too much about what's going on inside of you. I'm not sure, like, neuropsychologically what's going on here, but absolutely there's too much of an internal focus.
Mm-hmm.
My sweat, my heart racing, my thoughts, like, what I'm doing with my hands, my eye contact,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so what tends to happen is you get so internally focused that you're not actually looking at other people
Mm-mm.
and you're not taking in the real world data.
Right.
What you end up doing is a lot of mind reading,
Mm-hmm.
which is that person thinks I'm bored. This person thinks I'm ugly. This person doesn't want to talk to me. They're looking at their watch the whole
Mm-hmm.
time. And you think you're Professor X from the X-Men. You think you can read other people's
Right.
minds. But it's your anxiety talking,
Right.
and it's your anxiety making you too aware
Mm-hmm.
inside what's
Mm-hmm.
happening here. The thing about social anxiety is about bringing the intention out, bringing
Right.
the eye contact here, like letting whatever the heck this thing is gonna do, let it do its thing.
Mm-hmm.
But your job right now is to connect, there's that word again,
Right. Yeah.
with this other human. Focus on them,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and take in the real data. That's a lot of what my exposures were always focused on
Mm-hmm.
is, um, don't make any decisions based on what your anxiety is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go get some real world data, some
Mm-hmm.
practical therapy, and let's collect the information about what is really happening outside.
Right.
And Amber, so much of it often was just me helping people bring their eye contact up.
Right. Yeah.
Because if we did this interview and I was looking at you this way,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be like, "What? Is Ollie okay? Like, what's wrong with him? Is
Mm-hmm.
he depressed? What's going on?" And anyone who's watching probably would lose interest too, but you need that eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to connect with another person. And a lot of this is me helping people to take the focus away from here and bring it right here.
Right. I was in a training recently on polyvagal theory, and they have
Mm,
this saying in that concept, and it's called story follows state. And that was like the thing I took away
mm,
from the whole training, which I liked. And meaning your narrative is really based on what's going on inside of you physiologically. So if you're like in this calm state, if you put somebody in a situation in a calm state and you say what happened, they're going to come back with a totally different story than if you put a person that's in this like a fight or flight state or something like this over awareness state in that situation. They come back with a totally different story.
Totally.
Right. Our
You
narrative is really
you
based on
experience a
this,
world totally
not
differently.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm. So yeah, I love that and then that's reinforcing the wrong ideas because what
So
you
yeah.
remember about what happened wasn't what really happened. It was what happened in here. And then you're
Yep.
deciding that that's a reflection of that. And then so you're just I knew it. They were thinking that, I knew I would sound like an idiot and I did and all that kind of stuff. Can you tell
Yeah, that
the
was a lot of
viewers where to
fun.
find you if they want to learn more from you? Where should they look for you?
Yeah, my home on the internet is my YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/ at
Hmm.
DRALI,
Hmm.
that'll get you to me. Dr. Ali, that's my YouTube channel. Lots of stuff there. Lots of stuff on social anxiety,
Hmm.
and I'm always posting things. So yeah, let's get connected on YouTube. I'd love to see people there.